Organized money.
I live in Maryland, but I think it's fair to say that California is the center of the political world right now. You have the Netflix, Paramount, um, Warner Brothers bidding war. You have a whole series of fights over utilities. You have a bunch of really interesting anti-monopoly work going on there. You have one of the more interesting governor's races. So you are in the center of the world because I don't know if people know this. Dave lives in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
What's it like?
So, I mean, the interesting thing about here is sometimes I call it that we have this political brain drain in California. So, everyone who imagines themselves to be interested in politics is interested in national politics. Maybe they're interested in local fights, like San Francisco has this cutthroat political culture where the locals are always beating up on each other. But nobody cares about state politics in California. It is not a thing that you think about. Gavin Newsom kind of styles himself the front runner of the presidential race in 2028. He did that because he started trolling Donald Trump, had nothing to do with what he's passed at the state level. If you asked anyone here, including big Gavin Newsom fans, what he has done for the state of California, they wouldn't be able to tell you because it's just not a thing. It's not. There is no sort of state political culture or media or anything and if you're thinking about politics, it's about people from Washington airdropping in and doing fundraisers here.
So one of the interesting dynamics right now is this Warner Netflix deal and then Paramount coming in, all of which are California companies.
Yeah.
And if a merger goes through, it will devastate the economy of Los Angeles. And yet, by and large, with the exception of a couple of politicians, the California political establishment has been silent, except for one man who we're going to have on the show.
Right. But I mean, let's explain sort of maybe why that is. So state California politics are unique in that the political donations are virtually unlimited. There is very little restrictions on state political spending in the state of California. So if you think about this merger and you have CEOs of Netflix, the CEO of Paramount is the son of the second richest person in the world, who is also a Californian. David Zaslav stands to gain $500 million if he successfully completes this merger. Those are people with big pockets that can fund state political races almost by themselves and with very little restrictions. And so to me, the fact that all of the frontrunners practically of the governor's race, it's a huge race next year, they have said nothing about the fact that this major potential deal would restrict the number of studios in Hollywood and maybe destroy movie theaters entirely because of the loss of output and would really harm what is a company town of Los Angeles, which has hundreds of thousands of people who work in the movie and television business.
So we have someone on the show who is running for governor of California, Tom Steyer, and he has actually been outspoken about the Netflix deal, opposing it. And he has also talked about utility monopolies and competition in general. He is also a billionaire. He was at a Farallon Capital Management, which is a hedge fund, until 2012. And then since then he's been a kind of an activist around environmental issues and a whole bunch of other sort of progressive.
He ran for president in 2020. Which is what you do if you're in California and you're a rich guy. Like it's kind of, once again, his route wasn't in state politics. It was, oh, okay, I'm interested in politics, so I must have to go to Washington. But he's coming back and running for governor in 2026. And he has some interesting ideas, I think, informed by his business experience about how the state should be run. And so it'll be an interesting conversation.
Organized money.
Tom Steyer, a former presidential candidate running for governor of California. Welcome to Organized Money.
Super cool to be here.
Tom, can you just quickly run through your career so people know who you are?
Sure. I came out, I came to California on the first day of 1986 to start a business. It was an investment business, ran it for 27 years, walked away from it at the end of 2012 because I basically felt like I wanted to give back to the state of California. I felt like I'd had such a good run. This state had provided me so much opportunity, and I felt a responsibility to try and be a good citizen. And I've spent, a long time being an advocate for multiple things that would kind of some combination of justice and environmental safety. And I've been doing that since the end of 2012.
What is the weirdest thing about being on the trail? Like being a candidate's a very strange thing, and you've run for president and now you're running for governor. What's the weirdest thing that's happened to you on the trail?
Well, I think always the question is people think they know you. And to a large extent, people have sort of two-dimensional versions of who they think you are. And that's always true. So it's very, very normal.
Who are you, Tom? Who are you? Tell us who you are.
Here's who I think I am.
No, it's funny you say that. I actually, because you ran for president and then I've seen you running for governor. And so I kind of do feel like I know you a little bit. And it is a little weird, right? It must be weird for you because the first thing I'm like, hey, Tom, what's going on? And we've never met. So, but okay. So
here's what I would say. I think I come from a family that has been basically feels like you have a responsibility and a relationship with the rest of society to be a contributor. And that's the functional, important part of the decision about how you live your life, how you choose to work, how you choose to treat other people. And that's always been the impression. It's the opposite of a rip-off mentality. It's like, no. Your job as a citizen of the United States, your job as a Californian is to make sure that you're a positive contributor in a significant way. And if you're not doing that, then what the heck are you doing, man? And
well, one of the reasons why we wanted to bring you on is, we're thinking about this major deal here to the California economy, with Warner Brothers trying to sell itself. And it's an incredibly successful company over the last year. Huge commercial success. For the first time in its history, it's had opening weekends of over 40 billion in 7 straight movies. And a huge critical success. The expected Oscar winner and the expected runner-up are both Warner Brothers films. So we wanted to come in and ask a billionaire, why are they selling themselves if they're doing so well?
You're a billionaire. You must know. You must be smarter than everyone.
I do want to kind of understand this from a business perspective.
Well,
kidding aside.
I think 2 things. One, I'm not sure they wanted to be sold. I think that Paramount was pursuing them aggressively and pushing them and pushing them and pushing them. And so they kind of got pushed into getting sold. And I think that to some extent, they're feeling like, okay, if we have to get sold, let's get sold at the top when we're absolutely crushing it, particularly in an industry which has the possibility, and this is the absolute, proof of it, where there's a push to consolidation, a push to oligopoly is monopoly with a few more players. And if it's going towards an oligopoly, then maybe you can take advantage of the desire of the remaining players to have that control, to have the ability to lock down price, to have the ability to do all the things we're on this show to talk about not being very good for creative people or for consumers of creative content.
Right. And I mean, there's an accumulation. This is the 4th merger for Warner Brothers in the last decade and a half. And there's this accumulation of debt from all these failed mergers. And so their decision is to make another merger, which, as someone who spent a career in business, do you understand why a Netflix or a Paramount would want to take in this company, which obviously has this great brand and this great ability for success, but also has like $56 billion in debt.
Of course, I mean, look, from their standpoint, there are two different ways that I've been thinking about this deal, the way I think about this industry. There's the creative content, the movies that you produce, the streaming that you produce, the different shows. That is the creative part of this business that you're describing as how successful they are this year, both in terms of opening weekends and Oscar nominations as success. But the second part of this business that to me is the enduring, controlling part of this business is the distribution.
Right.
Who are you going? Okay, if the three of us decide we have this great idea for a TV show. Okay, where are we going to go? And if you control that, distribution system, that is something that doesn't go away. Like, let's say we have a terrible year, we still control it. We still get our cut of everything. And so to the extent you can reduce the competitors who can bring that kind of distribution system, that gives you so much more market power. So if you go back, just take one step up. I don't know if you want to go into this much theory, but just so you know, when it comes to market power, regardless of industry, the understanding is that if you have more than five market players, it is much, much more competitive. And as you get to 5 or 4 or 3 or 2, the amount of actual competition goes down really dramatically.
Where are you getting that? I think there's some scholarship that says that, but where are you getting that? Because you've been in the markets
looking at
for
industries
decades.
for a long time.
Okay,
and I'm talking about let's say the cable television business. Let's talk about the cell phone business. I mean, that is one of the places around this world where there were multiple players in multiple markets. So if you wanted a chance to kind of do a controlled experiment about the impact of concentration in a business on price and service, the cell phone business was pretty damn good because there are a lot of countries in this world and they had a lot of different frameworks for doing cell phones. So you could see what happened if there were 7 players or 3 players. So when you say, Matt, where's that coming from? You're just making that up for the morning. It's like, no, this is empirical evidence of watching over decades what happens. And what happens is when you get below 5 players, people have much more market power and they don't have to meet in a hotel room and set up what they're going to do. They are well-known, tried and true ways to do signaling back and forth. And the prices go up, the ability to control price goes up a lot. The need to compete on service goes down a lot. That's just empirically what happens. I mean, the easiest way to think about it is above 5, there's always somebody who's going to go mad dog and try and get market share by dropping price.
Right. So would you say that one of the fundamental problems with governance in America in the last, I don't know, few decades has been not enforcing the antitrust laws with sufficient vigor?
I don't think there's any question that we've missed it. I don't think there's any question. I think because the new industries are so different from the industries about which the antitrust laws were originally written, which were things like railroads, they were physical things that people could see. And then we got into businesses where you can't see anything. There's no asset to touch. It's online. And people really, it was very hard for the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Department of Justice to wrap their minds around how those industries really work.
Well, you talk about new industries, but even in the context of this Netflix deal, it's actually going back to the past. You mentioned distribution as if you can control the distribution, you can raise prices and lower labor costs and things like that. That's really a return to the past of Hollywood, before the Paramount decrees, when the studios owned the theaters as well. And they've kind of figured out, here's a way that we can go back and do this again, and it's through the streaming channel. And that's one of the big concerns about this deal, is that that would become the main channel of distribution, and that theaters would wither on the vine and maybe even die, and there would be no other place to get this content but their own distribution network, right?
I completely agree with that, David, but I think it's more than that too. It's not just that the theaters will wither and die. It's also if there are three major distribution systems in place, and the three of us have some TV show to peddle, they have all the power. And we may have a great show, but they don't really care, because if they don't take our show, they'll just do their own show. And their own show gives them a much higher margin of success. So ours doesn't have to be as good or slightly better. We don't have any power.
And their own
they'll just squeeze us.
Their own show might be similar to ours, and so they buy our show and say, "Yeah, we'll put it on later," and they just put it on the side somewhere.
But they have all the power. If there are a lot of distribution channels, so they're competing with each other, they're like, "Whoa, Matt and Dave have really a great show. We need to put this thing on as soon as possible and really blow it out
this show
and win."
we're going to put on, I wonder.
I think. Sorry, go on, David.
No, go ahead.
No, I wanted to take it away from movies for a little bit to the rest of the economy and affordability. Mm-hmm. If you want to continue on with movies, let's talk. Go ahead.
Well, one thing I want to ask is, you were really out front early opposing this deal, unlike people you're running against, or really any politician in California. And I imagine that the people who go to work in Hollywood and go to one of the sound stages, they all agree with you. And the people that go to work in Hollywood and go to the executive suite probably don't. And those people that go to the executive suite are probably more powerful, relatively speaking, in politics in California. And so it took something to say, I'm gonna look at this issue this way, and I'm not going to be afraid of stepping out. So why announce this opposition and explain your thought process?
Okay, this is it. That's such a big compliment you just paid me unintentionally. If the working people of this state think I'm standing up for them, which is what I'm trying to do, and the oligarchs in this state think I stink, man, I think I'm hitting it out of the park. And that's the truth, because I don't need them to support me. I don't have a conflict in this. I have a simple desire to represent the working people of California, period, the end. And that's why I did that. I feel like this is an attack. Yeah, there's a million reasons why this is a deal that has huge problems with it. The ones we're talking about in terms of monopoly, the fact that the president has weighed in and says he's going to want his voice to be heard in something where his son-in-law is involved, where his political allies are involved, where he's trying to stifle CNN, which he views as a voice in America that should be shut down. And there are multiple reasons why this process and this deal are very, very threatening. But underneath it all, there's this question about, we're going to shut down creative people. We're going to reduce the competition, the job creation of one of the most vibrant industries in the state of California that's been representative. It's created tons and tons of well-paid jobs, specifically throughout Los Angeles. And so the idea that that's going to be allowed to happen and no one's going to speak up, that doesn't even make any sense to me. So from my standpoint, yeah, there's all the theoretical stuff, but it gets down to what I originally started with, which is the working people who've built this state, the working people who make this state run, are not being treated fairly in this state. And it's really important that somebody speak up for them. And if you think I'm doing that, then I'm thrilled.
Do the other billionaires at your shadowy puppet master convention, do they make fun of you? Are they? I'm just wondering, because we've always wondered how the shadowy puppet master conventions go, and I thought you might.
Well,
thank you for laughing.
Anyway, that
was a lame joke.
So you mentioned the importance of of the film industry, the entertainment industry to Los Angeles. It's a major part of the economy of this city and also of the state. And it's been losing production share for years. So this year, California extended the production tax credit through 2030. It massively expanded it. Some would argue that, who actually gets this? This is kind of corporate welfare for precisely the entities that are consolidating here. And you pit states against states and you pit nations against nations and who benefits, right? So what are some of your solutions? Los Angeles is kind of a company town still. And what are your solutions to sort of get out of this box where we just have to keep throwing money at these studios in order to keep them here?
Well, California is the best place in the world to start a business. It's the best place in the world to grow a business. It's one of the most expensive places in the world to operate a business. And that's something that the governor can attack. So a lot of when you look at you said, our percentage of production has been going down for years. There are extremely high costs to doing production in Los Angeles, California. There are all kinds of regulations and controls that are very expensive to meet. And the example that I use most broadly for companies across California in the film industry or the streaming industry or any industry is electricity.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a company in the state of California, you're competing with companies in other states, but you're competing with companies around the world. Our electricity costs are approximately twice the national average. We have we're talking about monopolies. We have public utility monopolies by law. If you look at the places that have competitive generation of electricity, the prices that they charge consumers and businesses are much lower. And as electricity becomes a much bigger competitive part of an awful lot of industries, the need to drop those prices becomes that much more significant. So when we think about production, there's a whole host of things that the state is doing that makes production extremely expensive here. And that we can go after that very directly to drop costs. We can go after electricity costs very directly to drop costs and put us back on a level playing field so that we can, increase the percentage of production around the world.
With all due respect, I want to talk about electricity eventually, but I don't know that that's the big issue for Hollywood studios.
It isn't. It is how I completely agree with you. It is, however, for artificial intelligence.
We're gonna get there. We want to talk about that, but we want to close out on the Hollywood piece because that's such an important monopoly story right now. But it's also really important for Los Angeles and for California. But we will get to utilities because there's a lot to talk about.
Production that you have to meet in Los Angeles, California.
Yeah, there are some rules,
but quite expensive and controlled by governments around, local governments in the state.
But some of those rules, frankly, are union rules, right? And Brady Corbet, who made the Brutalist last year, said, "I'm not filming anywhere but Hungary because you have all these rules. You got to pay these crew members too much money." That seems to me like the opposite of what you were talking about of standing up for workers and against studio executives. So, how do you manage?
Well, let me say this.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe in people getting the kind of wages that unions push for, and that is critical.
Okay.
To me, the issue in all of this stuff is going to be about rules. It's never, and to me, and again, I want to talk about something that's not specifically Hollywood, but I think is absolutely comparable. Look, there are a lot of rules about building in California, which means we're not building houses in California.
Right.
We can build literally 3 to 4 times as many houses, creating many, many more good paying jobs if we do it in a new way. And I think that is the way we have to go, but we have to do it together. My goal in this, just so you guys know, is really to have a different vision about how California works. And so if you think about the union rules in terms of Hollywood, if you think about my attitude is not to fight the unions. My point is going to be for us to get a lot of union jobs, we've got to be competitive. Now let's sit down together and figure out how to do that, because I'm never going to be in favor of cutting wages for working people in this state ever. I'm going to be in favor of us succeeding together and figuring out together how to make that happen.
Okay.
Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification button so that more people can get exposed to organized money. Really appreciate it. Tom, I think it's best to characterize you as more of the anti-monopoly-ish candidate in the California governor's race, and it's a big state, it's a big economy. How do you think about, the economy and how you're running and what you're running for?
Well, California has an incredibly vibrant economy overall, and it's extremely diverse, and it is in many ways world leading. The technology industry here really is the world leader. It creates a massive amount of new, huge businesses. It creates the opportunity for a lot of really well-paid jobs. There's some serious problems with it, which is we live in a state that has a massive amount of inequality. And there are some of the very richest people in the world, but the majority of Californians are living paycheck to paycheck. And so, I'm running because most Californians can't afford to live in California anymore. And it's critical for us to bring down costs for their life in terms of rent, in terms of electricity costs. So we have a very vibrant economy, and we need to make sure that the success of that and the benefits of that are shared much more broadly in our state.
So let me ask a kind of a different question, which is that the California, I forget what it's called, but there's a commission in California that works for the legislature that makes recommendations on different laws. And right now, that commission is looking at a revamp of the California antitrust code because there are some certain gaps in the California law. It doesn't have a law that allows for, I believe, unilateral conduct, so just going after monopolies directly. And there are some gaps in merger law. There are also, so California, the state attorneys general has to use the Sherman Act, which is the federal law, and some of the precedents there make it harder to use. So what is your kind of general view on the California revamping its antitrust laws and largely strengthening them, making merger prohibitions easier to bring, challenging monopolies, challenging forms of price discrimination, those kinds of things that we see in the economy today that there's really not a lot of, that it's hard to challenge?
Well, I mean, Matt, I think the biggest issue here is where does the decision making lie within the United States? And so the idea that a state could unilaterally stop a merger based on its antitrust rules is one that I believe the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice would fight really strongly. I think that as long as those are, businesses that work throughout the country and where then I think they're going to push really hard. I think we can have influence. I think we can push, but I think our ability to go to court and, I might be wrong, but I've watched this for decades. I've never seen a state in a interstate business be able to overcome the power of the federal government.
Yeah.
Well, wait, so you're saying that would be an argument either. So if you agree with that policy that only the federal government should be able to do it, then you wouldn't want to strengthen the state antitrust laws. But if you don't agree with that policy framework, if you want more state,
well, let's be clear. The federal government's antitrust policies have fallen down. I think that's very clear. And so I would want to look, and I haven't. So, I want to plead ignorance on this, but I would want to look closely to see what is the legal basis for this. Do we have the ability to do it? Because clearly the federal antitrust authorities have fallen down.
Right.
Over an extended period of time, this would be another, not the first example, this would be another in a continuing series of failures to enforce antitrust.
Well, let's get into your broader philosophy here. I mean, one of the things I think you've brought out in this conversation is a real focus on affordability. Affordability is kind of like one of these perfect words for democratic politics because it can mean absolutely anything and be used to justify any policy. So,
and it really, no one knows what it means.
And no one knows what it means.
It's very vague. You're saying it's very vague. It's extremely vague. And no one uses the word affordability in normal conversation.
So let's drill it down. I mean, what does it mean to you? Like, what policies would an affordability agenda manifest for you?
First of all, we have to bring down the cost of housing. That's the biggest one for families. It's whether it's rent or the ability to buy a house. We have stopped building houses in the state of California. So we are millions of houses short. And what does that mean? It means rent's too high. It means that a lot of people who traditionally would be thinking that they were going to buy their own house, that would be planning their life around owning a house, don't think they can. And also the homelessness issue. The number of people who are homeless on the street is directly related to how many roofs there are in the state of California.
Yeah.
And so to a very large extent, our inability to build, the fact that we're stuck in the mud in terms of actually building physical things, and we could go in it, is number one, because it's about rent.
Well,
and that's the biggest expense for families.
I think there's been something of a false sort of argument in the Democratic establishment around the abundance thing in housing, being like, oh my gosh, look at all these rules, it's impossible to build. But what happened in California, the story is pretty simple. They stopped building after 2008, and we didn't call it the great zoning crisis of 2008. It was I think the number of builders collapsed by about half or 60%. The number of banks, I mean, you're in the financial services industry, you know this, the number of banks collapsed. It seems like it's a financing problem, right? You can clear all the red tape that you want, but if developers can't get financing, ain't going to build, right? Or if the government can't do the building itself, ain't going to build. So like, is it a financing challenge, or is it just sort of pulling back rules?
Matt, I don't think that there's a single answer to this. I do think that the number of jurisdictions that have control over building, it was too much. I do think that there was a attempt to redo CEQA this year, the California Environmental Quality Act, because it had become a tool to stop all building. I think that there was a attempt this year to change some of those zoning things. So I think that is definitely part of it. But I think the other part of it that is really, really big is how expensive it is to build per square foot in the state of California. And that is something which there are a lot of reasons for, but there is also a straightforward way to address in my mind, which is there are new technologies. There are new ways of building that are different from the 19th century that involve. And if we can do that, we will create.
You're talking about modular housing, prefab, and that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm talking about manufacturing housing as opposed to building on site. And I'm not really talking about what people normally think about, which is building pods and sticking them together. I think there are new techniques for building offsite, which will create an enormous number of jobs. And those can be really good paying union jobs. And my point is, we can do 3 to 4 times as many houses, and that will be an awful lot of good paying jobs. And right now, I believe the cost of that per square foot is about a third lower. And I think, as in all technologies, as you move to scale, there are economies of scale. That's not just a cliche, that's a fact. And you can look at this and say, we might really, honest to God, be able to drop the cost per square foot in half.
Okay.
In terms of the building part. So in answer to your question, Matt, I don't think there's a silver bullet here. I think there's, it's a cliche, so I'll apologize for it, but it's silver buckshot. There's multiple ways that we have to go address this in multiple ways. And so I'm talking about 3 simple ones, but there's a whole bunch of ones underneath that are really important too.
I've never heard the phrase silver buckshot, so that is not a cliche.
It's not a cliche.
I've never heard it. heard it.
In that case, I just invented it.
You invented it. You are a wordsmith.
So one of your other early campaign promises is to, in your words, bust up the utility monopolies. And we touched on this a little bit just before. Can you explain your thought process here? What does it mean to bust up the utility monopolies? What do you want to do?
It means that you can buy electricity from multiple places. And if we do that, if we make it possible for different people to compete, the price will go down, because that's just the way it works.
But the wholesale market, sure. But you have one line. Are you saying like install separate power, like 2 power lines into your house so you can choose,
No,
or what? Like,
but I'm saying that, well, this kind of goes back to the conversation about Warner, which is this. If we have multiple people accessing the line, we're not building multiple lines. But in fact, what we're talking about is much more community-based solar, the ability to generate. And distribute electricity in local places.
All right.
That is something which is illegal to a very large extent in the state of California.
Community
Don't have a
grid sort of
choice.
stuff. Okay.
And so I see this as, if you can look at other states, I mean, one of the great things is there are 49 other states, and the states that do this have much lower cost for electricity.
So
which
the way it
hence-
works in a lot of states is we have utilities. They're natural kind of monopolies. We only get one line to the house, but there are these oversight commissions, these public utility commissions that are supposed to tightly and strictly regulate these utility companies. And if you look at the Dow, the S&P 500, you look at utilities, they're wildly profitable and their stocks are going way up. And it's impossible for those two things to be true at the same time. So what is breaking down with the utility commissions and creating supposedly strict ratepayer regulation, but also they're wildly successful, profitable companies?
Okay. Well, we have to go back to this really simple thing, which is monopolies are in the business of charging the highest prices and providing the worst service. And if you don't like it, you can lump it because we're a monopoly and there's no place else to go. So when you look at a public utility commission, which is designed to control a monopoly, it's like, okay, structurally, that will not work. And I'll give you an example. Look, if you look at California, an overwhelming cost for Californian electricity users is the cost of preventing fire. These public utilities are doing all kinds of things and putting it into the rate base and getting a return on that stuff for reducing fire. And one of the things they're doing is they're undergrounding a lot of lines. I don't know how much you've done in terms of fire prevention or if you've ever looked at the cost of underground lines. It's really high. It's incredibly high. But
so it's the cost of fires.
There are other ways to achieve the same thing that are much less expensive. So, but if the three of us are running a public utility and we get to put that in a rate base and we get a guaranteed return on that, that's great business.
Well, let me drill into that I just want to clarify something. So the actual power line to your home, right? There's just going to be one of those. So when you talk about competition, you mean you should be able to select among a bunch of different power producers, but that line to your home is always going to be a monopoly. So you need some form of control over that. Is that
yes.
Or is that right?
To the extent that we're going to have a single distribution line, yes, that is going to be, and it's have to be controlled. But let me say this: we are going to, the ability to create energy in a given place and sell it locally also exists to a huge extent.
Yeah, California has net metering, and that's its own thing. But I just wanted to clarify that the public commissions exist to control a monopoly, and that monopoly, you can structure it in lots of ways. It could be worse or better, but to some extent, that is kind of inherent to just having one power line into the home or the business. Right. And that I just want to clarify that so that we can talk about how those commissions work, because I think how those commissions work, and one of the things you said is really important. So that's why I want to get to, which is the rate base and the rate of return. So if I'm a utility,
which is actually how people think that the electric utility makes money by selling you electricity, but that's not true. The electric utility makes money by getting investment accepted into the rate base with a guaranteed rate of return.
Right. And that's what I want to get at. So right now, and this is true kind of across the country, but California is among the worst. It has the Public Utility Commission gives I think it's a 9.5 or 10% guaranteed rate return on equity, which is a form of investment to utility investors, right? Now you were in financial services for a long time. You're in the shadowy Puppet Master Club. If somebody said to you, "Hey,
I haven't been in."
I'm going to keep razzing you, dude. Sorry, it's one of the deep costs of being a billionaire is I'm going to make fun of you.
It's a very minor cost.
You'll have to live with it. So if someone said to you, Tom, we'll give you a guaranteed rate of 9.5% return on equity or 10% return on equity, Is that a good return on, like, is that a good guaranteed amount of return, or is that like low, or what? Because the argument from the utility commissions is, oh, if we don't give them
No one
9.5% or
wants that.
10% guaranteed, we'll never get any investors. Does that make sense?
No. I mean, think about the world that we're in, which is we're in a 2 to 3% inflationary world.
Yeah.
So that's somewhere
Okay.
between 6.5% real rate of return riskless
Right.
and a 7.5% real rate of return riskless.
So that's
Those
like
are-
And
about
as a businessman, you're saying that's good.
right.
That's
You would love it.
So first of all, that's fantastic. But the way that you know is they all trade way above their invested the book
yeah.
value of the thing.
Exactly.
So if it was a fair rate of return, you'd think it'd be trading at book value. Like
Right.
we've made a return up to here, and when you put your money in, it's worth exactly what the money in was put before, but
Right.
you get returns during the years. No. So you know from the market itself that these are really high rates of return. And but it's also, I mean, the other thing, Matt, that I really think is important is it's a question of incentives. Like if the three of us want to make sure that there are not catastrophic fires. Okay, there are a lot of different ways to do it. Let's choose the most expensive one we can conceive
Right.
of, which is undergrounding lines. You want to know why? Because we get 9.5% on.
But let
Do
me.
that till the cows come home.
I know they're gold plating, and they do things like they replace poles, electricity poles that are fine with new poles, so that they can just gold plate stuff.
Yeah.
It's happening all over the country. But let me ask you a slightly. So here's an unorthodox solution to the problem, and you will, because I'm going to stop making fun of you for that, but you'll get it, right? If
I'm
you
going to
were,
start making fun of that brown jacket of yours, Matt.
There you go.
that's totally fair.
Yeah,
It's
that is fair.
it's the style, man. If you were to, like, one of the easy ways to address the problem would be to just have an auction, right? And you say, all right, I want 9.5%, but if somebody's willing to come in and say, I'll bid and I'll bid at 9%, and someone else comes in and says, no, if you're going to guarantee it, I'll do 7% or whatever it is. Instead of having these regulatory commissions just set a guaranteed return on equity,
Yeah, people
could
bid.
you just do a financial auction to, like, set the actual market
But
rate?
isn't that sort of like what I'm talking about in terms of what they call competition?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It would be a
It
competitive
is.
auction rate, right? But
And
it would
then
be it would be sort of replacing the return on equity function of calculation of this group of sort of, regulators with an actual financial market.
And that's what I'm trying to get to. And I mean, I know in all the structural changes, God is in the details of getting it right. I got that.
Mhm.
But the truth is, what you're talking about is people figuring out ways to provide electricity less expensively and in new and creative ways. And that sounds, like super jargony, but we have an example. We used to have a telephone monopoly in the United States of America called AT&T, and they broke it up in the, mid 90s. And the AT&T was like, this is the end of telephony. This is the end of the world. Nothing will ever happen. You're screwed. And what actually happened is no one uses a wireline anymore. There's incredible explosion of different kind of communications technologies.
But yeah, I don't want
Much more-
spoilers. I don't want spoilers.
I'm just saying, you look at what happens and all of a sudden people are like, we have this new way of doing this, like blah, 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 blah. But it's incredible. And when we're looking at electricity, there is enormous amount of stuff coming in electricity. The batteries, you guys are talking about, okay, everybody needs to access to the line that's all going to be generated far away. But is that really true? Like, the truth of the matter is there's going to be a lot of new technologies, including batteries went down 80% last decade in cost. They're going to get down another 80%. The ability to generate and store on-site electricity is going to go through the roof. And where that takes us, Matt, I can make some guesses, but I don't know, and neither does anyone else. But what I do know is that we have a decade of really smart people figuring out how to get in here. We're going to have a completely different situation than we.
So, as governor, you would have the ability to nominate 4 members of the Public Utilities Commission in your first term. So, who are you looking for? Not who personally, but what type of person are you looking for, and what do you want them to do?
Look, I think What I want is people who are going to be focused on the need to reduce cost. And I want people who understand how electricity not only has been delivered, but can be delivered. And so that's going to be a group of people who are going to understand, look, this structure made sense in the 20th century. We're in the 21st century. We have a structure that gives incentives. These aren't bad people running these utilities. These are good people, but they're in a structure where their incentive is to get as much money into the rate base as possible. That's their incentive. And whatever they say, that's what they're getting paid to do. That's what their shareholders want them to do. That's what their job is based around. That doesn't make them bad people. It just means we need to change the structure so they see differently.
Well, the other thing is the regulators themselves, and sometimes the environmental groups and the consumer groups, they actually think, well, we need a clean energy transition, and we need all of these bells and whistles, and we need to help. We need to sort of have some sort of wealth transfer aspect through the utility bills. And what ends up happening is there's always an incentive to bake in more of a rate base on the part of a wide variety of groups. I don't want to overstate it, because I think the consumer groups and the environmental groups are recognizing affordability as a real challenge. But you do have this problem where for a long time, I think people were saying, oh, we need a clean energy transition. Let's just give the utilities all of the capital that they're asking for, without addressing the fact that you had a guaranteed 9.5%, 10% return on equity off of that rate base, and that they were gold plating stuff.
Yeah.
Look, the thing that's true is if we drop electricity prices dramatically, and I've said we have to drop at least 25%, but that's not the number I'm really focused on. But if we drop, that helps everybody. And at this point, Matt, let's be clear. Renewables are much cheaper than fossil fuels. Much. And if you look about the world, or you look about the United States of America, in 2024, 94% of new electricity generation worldwide was renewable. Because
but it's that wire to the house where the cost really is. Like that guy is the one that is gouging. And you can do some things about that, but it is that wire to the house, whether it's coming in through solar or battery or coal or whatever it is. It's the guy with the wire to the house that has the chokehold.
Control. Is this the point we were making about Warner?
Yeah.
The guy who controls the distribution can squeeze you. And it's not the wire to the house. It's not the cost of the wire to the house. It's the accumulated overhead that's been shoved into that distribution system over a century that you're paying for. It's not the cost of solar and wind. Everyone's like, the problem here is solar and wind. It's like, solar and wind is the cheapest thing in the world, man. It's not solar and wind. The problem here is we have an accumulated rate base that has been stuck in there and is sitting there. And
I think we want to get to Sacramento political culture, but I will note that utility rates came down historically with a brief spike in the 20s. They came down until the 1970s, and they only started going back up in the 1990s, and then they've gone up sort of like since then. So there is a basic problem here that is not a century long, but I mean, you're right to say that the rate base is built in the course of a century or more. But actually, that
coincides with the rise of investor-owned utilities.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, one of the larger unsaid portions of this is that public power companies are asking for much lower rates of return, and there is a case to be made for public power here.
I mean, the biggest law firm in San Diego is the San Diego Private Electric Utility, because I've looked at the different employee lists of the public utilities versus the investor-owned ones, and the big difference is that the public utility, I think this was one in San Diego, I don't remember which one, but they have like one or two lawyers on staff who's paid, a reasonable amount, but not that much. And then you look at the private one, and it's got like 30 lawyers, each of who's paid $800,000 a year. And I'm like,
because that's actually like their business.
Their business is playing the game
into the rate base.
No, I know that. I'm just, And
that's your point. Is like they are sitting here. Their job is to figure out how to get more stuff into the rate base.
Yeah.
So,
and coincidentally, they also provide electricity.
I just want to crap on the 70s. Except for the music. The 70s were a mistake.
So I have a somewhat different question. You're running to be governor of California. You apparently like the city of Sacramento so much you want to spend all your time there. there is
Okay, now
there
you're
is
taking a
really
shot.
there is really no political culture in Cal. I live in California. There's very little political culture at the state level. There's at the local level there is, and at the national level there is. But at the state level, there isn't much political media. The legislative calendar is very compressed. Really, only things happen with the budget in June and in August with the rest of the bills. There hasn't been a veto override in 45 years. The only way Gavin Newsom has used the platform of the governor successfully is by becoming a national figure. It's not by becoming beloved at the state level for things he's doing in the state. Why do you think you can convince Californians that their lives will be improved when they're so oblivious to anything going on at the state level? I'm being very serious
I know you are, but it's a great question. But there's something going on here that is overwhelming, and that is the fact that people can't afford to live here, and the
Yeah,
services aren't what they expect.
but they
And
don't
those are
connect
both
it to what happens in
day-to-day
Sacramento.
facts.
They
Excuse
don't
me?
connect it, though, to what happens in Sacramento. That's the disconnect. And
I
how do
agree
you
with
think,
you.
as a governor, you can change that?
Well, I think that there is a deep dissatisfaction with how people's lives are being handled in this state. Californians love California. What's not to love? I mean,
Yeah.
this place is great, but they also realize that they can't afford to live here. That's a huge day-to-day problem. They don't connect it, as you said it, with the state, but people probably don't realize their rent is so high, there's not enough houses in the state of California for the 40 million Californians. They the electricity rates are outside of California. They just know the rates are going up a lot here.
Right.
You know, there are a series of issues where they're like, wow, this isn't very good, but they don't necessarily connect it. But my point is, I want to attack the substance of this, which is often structural. It's not just we're going to do the same thing harder. We're going to have to change the structure because the structure is what's driving the outcome. And so we have to make some structural changes in systems that were set up a long time ago and here's another fancy word, sclerotic. It means they're jammed up. It means they're, full of fatty acids that are preventing the blood from flowing. And we need to structurally change multiple things in this state. And with something we haven't talked about. Look, I've talked a lot about rent, which is the thing that's most on people's minds and which people don't necessarily connect with building new houses, but that's really what at the base we need to do. But the other thing that's blowing up for people's lives in the state of California is healthcare costs. I mean, people are not talking about the fact as much as they should, in my mind, about the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act going away in 2026. They're not talking about the 3 million Californians who are projected to get thrown off Medi-Cal in 2026, in February of
Because
2027.
those are largely, as you just said, sort of federal policies and federal cutbacks. What do you think we can do as a state to fill that very hefty gap that's going to be created by the failure in Washington?
I think that there are a number of things that I'm talking about doing. So I would describe as short, medium term, and long term. Short term, I'm talking about basically getting rid of the corporate real estate tax loophole that's been in there since Prop 13 that costs
split rate, yeah.
California. Yeah. But God will be in the details on that too to make sure it's right. But it's basically $10 to $15 billion a year at the local level for education and healthcare. So that's a partial down payment.
Disneyland is paying 1978 rates for its
exactly. And to me, this is a loophole.
Yeah.
This is not fair.
100%.
This is a straight up mistake that was put into a prop that has to go back to a prop to be undone.
Right.
I've done this successfully. I've run props against the oil companies successfully, the tobacco companies successfully, the multinationals that were gaming our state income tax successfully when no one else was willing to. And I will definitely do this and deliver that money. That's part of a down payment to make up for the money that the Trump administration is taking away from us. So that's the first thing. But
so use that money to backfill on health.
That's the down payment. But I said short, medium term, long term. Long term, we have a structural problem here, and that is, you were saying, is 9.5% a good return? Healthcare is compounding in cost. between 6 and 7% a year, sometimes 8. That is a number that is unsustainable. And let me just give you the example I like to use so people can get in their head what that really means, the compounding, how powerful that is. Peter Stuyvesant bought Manhattan Island in like 1628 for $28. $28. If he compounded at 9.5%, just so you know, he could easily rebuy Manhattan Island today with every building on it. That is, when you say is 9.5% guaranteed a good return, ask Peter Stuyvesant. That's an incredible return. If you can do that for that period of time, that's incredible. So when we look at healthcare costs, in effect, instead of being the people with the $28 that is compounding, it's compounding against.
Here's a question. So the basic idea with healthcare, like I think one of the problems that Democrats have is nobody likes the fact that healthcare costs are going up 6-7%. But the question is, what is driving that? Right. I mean, there's this sort of a theory. Oh, it's just more technology. Oh, it's just more stuff. Oh, it's much. And then there's a theory. Well, it's just a bunch of middlemen who are getting their sticky hands on it. Like I have this thing where it's like my healthcare premiums went up by 10% this year. They went up a bunch last year and the year before. Hospitals are closing down. Pharmacies are closing down. Where's all the money going? That's kind of the question that I have. It's like healthcare is not getting better, 10% better every year.
Matt, so let me say that. Yeah, which is my point. And if you look,
but what's driving the cost?
Okay,
I want to know, what do you think is driving?
I know, and I want to answer that question, but let me just take a step back before I answer, which is this. I said to you in terms of electricity, okay, there are 49 other states. Let's look at the ones that have competition and see what they charge. Okay, in healthcare, let's look at the countries that have a different system and see what they charge. So when you say, what's the problem? We actually have comparisons all around the world of other developed nations that have very different health systems and get health outcomes. They provide service and have cost of service. So we can do direct comparisons. And what we can see is go look at Canada. They have basically a single payer health system that costs half as much and gets better health outcomes. So when you ask me, is a significant part of this specifically the middlemen taking a slice? Yes.
Well, and there's no doubt. Gavin Newsom vetoed a bill that would have allowed the state to block private equity acquisitions of providers, hospitals, those kinds of things. Oregon passed a bill recently to take corporate power out of medicine, saying that providers have to be owned by doctors, clinicians, those kinds of things. You can't have third-party private equity groups or United Health Group or these middlemen coming in and owning them and engaging in forms of extraction. That would be our argument. The argument against it is, oh, there's all this great investment coming in. What's your view? Do you actually have to stop private equity from coming into healthcare?
Well, I think that, look, I said to you guys, look, the people who run these utilities are not bad people. Their job is to get stuff in the right place. They know that's their job. So when you ask them, are they decent people? The answer is yes, I'm paid to do this job. So when you, in answer to draw the comparison to this, Matt, if I'm running a private equity firm with a hospital, what's my job? To make more money from that hospital, to cut costs and raise price. That's my job. So when you say, do I think that, that's the hollowing out of the health system? It's like, okay, what are the costs? What are the services we can reduce? And where do we have the freedom to raise price? You have people whose job it is to do that, not to provide care.
Right. People see that
providing care is the
healthcare.
means. It's a bank. It's basically turning a hospital into a bank.
Right. People see that imperative in healthcare very differently than, if they're buying the little carts that you use at the airport. Like there's a difference in what,
because there's competition. Look, if we're doing something where there are multiple competitors providing a service and they have to compete on price and quality, then it's like, okay, go thou and compete. But in healthcare, if there's one hospital,
that's like Sutter,
there ain't no competition. Yeah. When you show up at the ER, you're not like, oh,
you don't shop around.
But I don't like your price. I'm going to drive 40 miles to the next hospital.
That's right.
So in many cases, look, that's one where I look structurally, we have a problem. And so you asked me, what are you going to do? And I said, look, in the short run, I'm going to try and I'm not going to try. If I'm governor, I will pass split roll. I will close the corporate real estate tax loophole. And no one else is saying that.
Mm-hmm.
That is real money. And it goes directly to the localities because that's a down payment on solving it. But I said to you guys, look, there's a structural issue in multiple places here. And when we look at our health system, it is really, and I don't know if you guys have looked at the state budget overall. This is the thing. Look, for families, rent is absolutely critical, but healthcare is, this is an issue where the math, the Peter Stuyvesant point is a big boulder and it's rolling downhill and it's rolling over us.
Wow.
And this is not something
that guy's
we can
dead.
avoid.
He doesn't need healthcare.
That
Peter
guy's
Stuyvesant is totally, he's fine.
true.
He told me he's cool with whatever system.
Okay.
All right.
Well, look, Tom Steyer, candidate for governor in 2026 in California. Thank you for being on Organized Money. This was really great. We learned a lot.
Yeah,
Thank you guys.
Thanks for coming.
too.
I really enjoyed. I gotta say, I enjoyed this, and yeah, it's fun to talk to like a financier turned populist politician. So
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this question, Matt. You said, what is the funny thing that happens? It's like I say, people are always surprised. They think they know who I am, and then they meet me, and they're like, "Hey, what the hell? Well, where did that come from?"
There it is.
there we
All
go.
right. Thanks a lot, Tom. I think we're good. So
Thank you, guys.
We
Super
appreciate
fun.
it.
Organized money.
All right. So I had a lot of thoughts coming out of that conversation. We don't usually talk to people running for elected office. So one thing I learned about Tom Steyer is that he actually got one of his early jobs was as a risk arbitrage trader under Bob Rubin at Goldman Sachs. And he was also in Morgan Stanley's corporate M&A department. So he really knows the guts of finance and the bad guy stuff, right? Like he's, and non-judgmentally, it was the 80s, whatever. Everyone was doing it. But,
there is a sense of him being kind of a traitor to his class, right? I mean, this is someone who actually knows the games that are being played, whether it's in the utility markets or in other sectors of the economy.
Yeah, he's very fluent in the language of business strategy and competition and finance. And you can tell when he's talking about the Netflix merger, he said, look, it's about squeezing. It's about because he's seen this happen throughout his career.
Right.
And I think there's something fascinating about the dynamic in Democratic politics where most Democratic politicians don't have that fluency or confidence in business, but then the ones who do are generally evil. Right. And so it's like, it's Tom Steyer. It seems like he's a populist. I'll take him at his word. I think he is. But so it's interesting. Like it feels like combining that understanding of finance and M&A with a populist vibe and perspective, but then also the kind of substantive legal and political knowledge. That's the Goldilocks.
Yeah.
That's the Goldilocks direction to go in.
Yeah. And it's obviously challenging for anyone because if you spend your life thinking about and knowing about the kind of structures of business, you might not have that core base of experience in politics. And if you spend your life doing the block and tackle of politics, you're not going to understand that the people talking to you saying, we want to grow the economy are actually wanting to do crimes and do evil things.
Yeah, no, I love. Also, I will say this. I like Tom. I got to say, I enjoyed the conversation. I think his heart's in the right place. I think he's got a lot of insightful things to say. I will say, and this is not about him because a lot of people say this when he just kept being like, they're not bad people. They're good people. They're decent people. They're just doing their job. And I'm kind of like, it's like, let's just take it out of that. Like, is Mark Zuckerberg a decent guy? I mean, it doesn't really matter because we are talking about
I think he's talking about some of these sort of the iron logic of business, which maybe it's not that iron, but he's saying that these guys are paid to maximize returns for their clients, and that's what they're doing.
Well, yeah, but then I of course I understand that, but as a political matter, you can say, look, I get paid to do this thing, and I don't think I should be paid to do this thing because I think the laws are structured poorly. Typically, that isn't how they operate. They usually are saying, I get paid to do this thing, and this thing is great. Look at how awesome private equity is for hospitals. We invest in critical acute care capabilities.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I mean, so it's like rats in the surgical room or whatever it is, like, so there is an element of, well, they're just decent people. And I'm not criticizing. You got to do that. I'm a broken human being. So I want everyone on my wavelength.
No, I mean,
most people want,
I think it is more of a tick, but it's, it's interesting to see how far, it'll be interesting to see how far he'll go with this idea, because again, it's very hard to break through here in terms of politics at the state level. He's saying something that should resonate, but the question is whether he'll be able to get that hearing.
I am sort of surprised that Katie Porter hasn't come out on the Warner merger, because she's an Elizabeth Warren disciple. She's also running for governor. I mean, I'm surprised. I feel like it's a pretty easy thing to do if you want to get a bunch of votes in LA.
She had this very weird, kind of disastrous, it was an interview conversation with a reporter, and she basically has gone underground since then. Like there's been almost nothing from her in the weeks since that happened. Yeah. And I don't know if her, political communications team is saying, let's just lay low and shut up for a while or what, but she's losing kind of the advantage that she had, which was her willingness to talk bluntly and speak truth to power. She's kind of decided to remain silent, and I think that's to her detriment.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the sort of the open question, which is not just about California, even though you are the center of the universe.
Thank
you.
You.
So you know.
Thank
you. personally, not just
yes.
It's because wherever you go.
I know what you're saying.
I think we're going to see a whole series of, and we already are seeing it, of candidates fighting within the Democratic Party about whether to do the economic populist thing or not. And I mean,
Steyer in particular is interesting because his role in politics in the 2020 presidential campaign was he was mainly this environmental guy, right?
Yeah.
He was talking about Green New Deal and how we have to build out the energy transition. He's really changed his posture in this race and has become more populist. Now, he's kind of moving to where the public is, I think. He's created, there are incentive structures that I think have been created to interest people like this. But when you have someone who's spent that time in business and M&A doing this, it hits different, right? He sounds a little different because he's kind of taking you in and saying, well, let me tell you how this actually works.
Yeah, this is how we make money off of your pain.
Right.
So, but I will say one other thing, which is that, you and I, I'm doing fine, right, in this economy. But when my health insurance premiums go up by 10%, I feel it and I don't like it, right? And when I see things I'm being overcharged for, sure, I don't like it. I don't think if you're at a certain level of wealth, you notice. And so Tom Steyer is sitting there, and I found it really interesting how he's able to actually, he's able to basically assess that people are very unhappy with a bunch of stuff, including, prices for electricity and healthcare and all that. But he himself doesn't feel it at all. And it's kind of weird that he's able to talk about these things and about corporate power, but all of his opponents who actually do feel it personally are not talking about it, which is it's kind of weird, right? Because you would think that it might be the opposite, but it's not.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So this is our last episode of the year. We're going to have a special episode next week that is part of a conversation that Cory Doctorow and I had here in Los Angeles in support of his book. And we have had a great year on Organized Money. We've loved doing the show. Thank you for listening, and we will be back in 2026.
Organized money.